Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a woman to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to A Menace to Society. I'm thrilled about this week's guest. It's kind of full circle because I'm here in Oklahoma now where we have interviewed the gentleman who drove the ballot initiative to legalize cannabis, Frank Grove. Also interviewed Hannibal Johnson, and he is an expert author on the Greenwood District and the historical aspects of that community. And now, today's guest, we have Dr. Darnell Blackmon, who is a cannabineur and a surgeon from the Greenwood District right here in Tulsa.
Hey, how are you guys doing today? Hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited to have you. We have never had a doctor who actually recommends that patients use cannabis.
Well, it's an emerging market, and as we know, it's not a new market, but it is new to Oklahoma. And anytime you have an emerging market, no one really wants to jump on board, especially when you have something that's not federally engaged, that is engaged on a state level. So, as an emerging market, you won't find a lot of people jumping on board initially, but I think that's going to change in the future.
Yeah, I think it's going to change quickly here in Oklahoma because I heard on NPR, I think it was, there are now more dispensaries than churches in this state.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. In fact, Oklahoma has said to be the fastest growing industry in terms of marijuana as opposed to any other state. And that's interesting when you look at California and Colorado and how long they've been around, how large the states are. Of course, Oklahoma's not as big as them. Everybody's embraced this tremendously.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the precedent was set by some other states. It became more acceptable the more states got on board. I think everyone anticipated medicinal marijuana coming to Oklahoma. Several of the residents have been out of state to see what other states were like, especially the ones where it's already legalized and it's no longer medicinal. So they have access. So I think everyone was waiting for this. And as soon as the word came, they jumped on board.
How did you get involved? Because I know your background is in surgery.
Yes, my background is in orthopedic surgery. And, I got involved in two different ways. Number one, there's been a huge opioid addiction problem in our state. A lot of states, but our state in particular.
Yeah, you're hard hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had in 1 year over 10,000 deaths from opioid overdose. Oh. And so, the laws change, and as the laws change and regulations start to affect physicians, you look for alternative ways to control pain. And so medicinal marijuana, for me, is a huge part of my practice because in orthopedic surgery, there's a lot of pain with bone surgery. Right. The other way is just that as soon as we heard that this was coming to our state, there's a group of us. It was 9 guys who got together and said, hey, listen, if this industry is coming, we should take advantage of it. And we decided to get together and open a dispensary. And so I'm kind of on both sides of it.
That's awesome. So you are actually very hands-on. You can actually recommend your patients use a plant instead of a pill if they feel like that's the best option. And you also know how to promote wellness right there at your own location.
Absolutely. So we opened Greenwood Wellness Clinic initially, and the clinic's purpose was to see patients who had a need and do recommendations. The function of the dispensary is then to be able to supply them whatever product they need. And those products will vary based on the patient. For instance, cancer patients have a tremendous amount of pain and may require something that's more potent. And then there are patients who only require something like CBD. So they can use topicals, they can use edibles, there are now drinks. And a lot of those are going to benefit patients that, let's say, for instance, may have a pulmonary disease that could not smoke a flower.
That's excellent. So you're giving alternatives to people on top of giving them alternatives.
Well, that's true. We've seen a number of patients also who have been on opioids for quite some time and have weaned off of opioids using medicinal marijuana. And I think that in itself is tremendous. The cost of pain medications and drugs and to treat addiction is tremendous in our country. We don't just help them in their problem, we also help the economic crisis.
Right. It is much more beneficial to smoke a plant or use a plant in a medicinal capacity than it is to go through all that other drama.
Yeah, people forget that medicinal marijuana is not new. This has been around since the days of George Washington. It's just that, we used it for hemp, and there weren't a whole lot of different strains. And then some people used it for medicinal medicine then. It then got a bad name during the war on drugs under Nancy Reagan and some others. And then as we move forward, we start to look at the benefit again. So the stigma's been there based on the war on drugs. But the medicinal purposes have been there since it's been years, hundreds of years.
Right. I don't think a lot of people know that our own Constitution is written on hemp.
That's correct. It is written on hemp. And that should show you how durable it is, right?
Right. And then a lot of our pharmaceutical companies and our government, as far as I'm aware, they already have patent information and copyrights on medicinal cures using cannabis and hemp.
That's true. I mean, and so again, it's new. This is just a way of reawakening society and reintroducing the medicinal side of marijuana.
Do you get any heat from other doctors because you're doing recommendations, or are they accepting?
So, it's so interesting. When we first started, there was a lot of pushback. There were doctors that didn't want to talk about it. No one wanted to recommend it. They spoke out publicly. Since now that time has moved forward and the benefit has been evolving in terms of decreasing the opioid use, and I think everyone thought there was going to be a lot more crime associated with it. I think that people are understanding more, and then doctors then understand more. Patients will go into the office and say, hey, I prefer medicinal marijuana to an opioid pain medication. And so therein lies one of the problems, however, because some doctors don't want you to take an opioid medication and use medicinal marijuana. However, if you look at the state of California, a lot of doctors don't even ask anymore because it's legalized. And so we're still catching up. But yes, doctors are definitely jumping on board. And there's more doctors doing recommendations now. So they start to accept it a lot more.
I've noticed there are a lot of billboards here advertising for people to get their cards.
There are a lot of billboards. In the state of Oklahoma, we have at least 700 dispensaries. I mean, that's a lot for this state. And so there are billboards all over that advertise for the dispensaries. They're advertised for recommendations. Some billboards even have out-of-state organizations that are trying to do recommendations within the state.
What? Like an out-of-state doctor can write your recommendation?
Yeah, so, the doctor that writes your recommendation has to have a license. So either that company is going to interface with a doctor who's in the state, or they're going to have people on their staff who get a license within the state to be able to write the recommendation, because it has to go through the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, of course.
Okay, so if you're a doctor in California and you're also licensed here, is that how it works?
If you're a doctor in California and you're licensed here, you can still interface patients through some web-based media, let's say, for instance, like FaceTime, and do recommendations. Now, there are some laws regarding that in terms of encryption and those types of things. But yes, you can do it if you're out of state.
Oh, that's really wild. So you could go away for a weekend and still work from your phone if you chose to.
Yes, and some people do that. In fact, when recommendations were initially started, it was a requirement that the doctor was in the office doing the recommendations. The current requirement is that a doctor cannot be in a dispensary and do a recommendation. They can do them from their own private office, however. Wow.
So that's really cool. They've given you a lot of independence.
There is independence, a lot more independence. I think that's going to increase. What we have not seen yet, the card, once you get it, it's good for 2 years. And we haven't seen the renewal process come about yet and how that's going to work. Is it going to be another doctor recommendation? Do you have to go through the whole process? If you previously had a card, will they renew it? And we just don't have that data yet.
Well, it seems like you guys are on top of situations in some respects that other states aren't. For instance, I know that to get your card here, you don't really have to claim a qualifying condition.
So initially, the state recommended that you had some diagnosis that would qualify you for a card. And that has since changed. In fact, the forms have changed. It's no longer required to have a diagnosis. But I think that the whole idea is that you're speaking to a medical professional who then will certify that some type of process is occurring with you that would require medicinal marijuana. Otherwise, then the thought is that, America's just getting high.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you want this to be a definite medicinal product if it's being dispensed as such.
Yeah, and so the idea is that when in George Washington days, there weren't strains of medicinal marijuana. You know, with our technology today, there's cross-pollination, there's all types of strains. And so you can have something that is a sativa dominant, that is a kind of a pick-me-up, or an indica dominant that's kind of a bring-me-down, or something in between. But clearly, if you're speaking to a medical professional and you're dealing with a lot of anxiety, then you wouldn't want to tell somebody to go get a sativa dominant product, because it might make their condition worse. And so I think to still engage the medical professional, I think it's a necessity.
Oh, I think it makes sense, complete sense. Your medical cannabis system seems to be very progressive compared to other states, which is kind of unique because you think this is such a conservative state. And yet you look at the independence that the physicians have and the independence that people have as patients here as far as what you can grow in your own home.
Right. Well, you know, and I think it's who gets there first. You know, whoever gets there first has to make all the rules, do all the experimenting. We have the benefit of piggybacking off of all the other states that have gone through this process. And so I think it's been pretty seamless here in Oklahoma. And I think it's given us a lot of ideas of how to grow that business fast, because we can simply look at other states who've done it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is going to happen in this cannabis industry in the next year? What do you think, just as you're watching it evolve?
Well, you know, it's an up and down, you know, kind of process. For instance, recently there's been more discussion about not allowing dispensaries to advertise on billboards.
Really?
Go figure. Yes, and so you take the billboards away, and then everything's going to have to go to digital media. But at the same time, there's talk about making medicinal marijuana legal in the state, so that you don't have to even have a card. And so, you know, it's all over the map. And I think that's a political battle on a state level. Mm-hmm. And so we're all subject to the state laws, and we just have to see how that's going to play out.
That's wild.
That is wild, isn't it? It's in fact, what's wild about it is that there's so many regulations, but the state's making a ton of money. The tax burden on a dispensary is somewhere around 70%.
Wow.
And it's really high. You know, you don't have the traditional tax deductions that you can have from a different business that is federally legal. So because it's federally illegal, but state legal, you don't get federal deductions. Now, if it ever becomes federally legal, that all goes away. It's just like having a grocery store on the corner.
Okay, but right now, you bring into my awareness, you have banking issues, right? When you have a dispensary, you can't put that into the bank.
Yeah, and so that's been one of the big issues, especially in other states who started doing this a long time ago. When you can't put money in a bank, you typically are going to put cash in an area, and that actually creates a crime risk, right? People know that there's cash. They think that they can go and rob a dispensary and try and take money out, and then some of them are, you know, if there's crime, it's for product. But clearly, if there were banking options, it would make this process a lot easier. Yeah, for instance, you know, the transactions all in cash, right? If there were banking options and it was fairly legal, then transactions could actually be on credit card. Yeah, I think we're a long ways from that here in Oklahoma, again, just because of the political battle. Mm-hmm. However, I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we probably are going to have this legalized in the state.
Wouldn't that be something?
It would be. I think it would put a lot of the money back into some of the dispensaries' hands as opposed to the state's hands. But I think it would also decrease the crime rate and increase access.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, get people off opioids because people are abusing them and overdosing and dying.
I mean, let's be clear. The VA is doing a study to see if medicinal marijuana can decrease the use of opioids in their veterans. And so we know that there is a benefit. Now, why is there still a huge pushback federally? I don't have the answer to that, because we all know there's a benefit to medicinal marijuana. Mm-hmm. And everyone that uses medicinal marijuana is not a smoker, right? Some people prefer to have a gummy bear or some type of a drink. They may not want to carry the odor. They may have, again, a pulmonary problem. It's not that they want to necessarily have the euphoric effect, but they want to get the pain relief. And so some people have tried CBD but need something a little more potent, and then they would look to go to medicinal marijuana.
Did you ever think that this would happen here in Oklahoma, that cannabis would be legalized?
Well, honestly, this is a red state. I never thought that it was going to happen here. I mean, you know, California is pretty liberal. And, you know, so is Colorado. Oklahoma, I thought was going to be way down on the list. But again, I think we were 30th state, I believe. Yes, I think that we're probably becoming legalized right in line of what everyone would think. We wouldn't be first, we wouldn't be last. Yeah, and it's more of an older state. I mean, you see a lot of youth here, but there are a lot of older people here. And when you have an older red state, embracing some of the ideas that more youthful states would think should be mainstream, it's going to be tougher. It's going to be a political battle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in other words, a lot of these people are thinking, "Wow, these are my kids just wanting to get high." And that's not the idea.
They don't know yet. I went to a dispensary, and the gentleman who was helping me was the owner. I think it was out in Bixby or near Bixby. And he was telling me that his mama is a devout churchgoer, and she thought this was very bad, and cannabis legalization was going to be a horrible thing. And then she came to find out a lot of her church family was actually using medicinal cannabis and feeling good. And so now she's taking edibles to relieve her arthritis, which is very severe.
Absolutely, and we see the same thing. Consider this. Consider there was once prohibition, and you couldn't buy alcohol in a store. And now you find alcohol on almost, every community has, some type of alcohol in it. Grocery stores now can carry cold beer. And the idea that we look at the danger of a product and we compare medicinal marijuana to alcohol and have alcohol be legal and medicinal marijuana not is ludicrous. Someone drinks, they drive, there's accidents, people die, there's liver failure, there's all types of health risks that go along with alcoholism, and we don't see the same risk with medicinal marijuana. However, medicinal marijuana is not legal, but I can go to the corner store and buy a six-pack.
Yeah, it's really messed up. I'll never have the medical knowledge that you have, and I will never even be near being a surgeon. But I am in grad school right now, and I'm learning how to be a counselor. And we're studying about the effects of alcohol and nicotine so much worse than using cannabis. The statistics are horrific about what nicotine and alcohol does to people, and yet you can buy this at the corner store.
Absolutely. When you talk about addiction, nicotine is one of the most potent addictive medications known to man. It's just a fact. We don't see the same addiction with marijuana. We don't see the same type of withdrawal with marijuana. We don't see the same type of penetrance of medical ailments caused by a substance like nicotine or alcohol. We don't see that with marijuana. Yet and still, the stigma is still there. And I think it's going to change. I think it has changed in several states, but I think federally it's going to change, and other countries have adopted this, and I think we're behind. We're learning.
Yeah, especially because as I'm learning, people used to give morphine to children. It used to be legal just to go buy a morphine drink and give it to your toddler. That's what the market was telling you to do. The industry was actually telling you that you should give your kids morphine.
Yes. There are a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of parents out there who have children who have certain ailments, and they will give their children medicinal marijuana to use to help to treat those ailments, which if we go back, just say maybe 10 years ago, and if you ever talked about something like that in this state, you would almost be tossed in jail.
Yeah, I would reckon.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and so again, we in this state, you would hear about what happens in California, and they would say, boy, those Californians, how can they do something like that? Well, now here we are.
Well, it seems like a good paradigm shift. If you've got elderly ladies who are okay with taking an edible because their peers are doing it and they feel like it's good, it can't be a bad thing.
Correct. That's correct. So, I think what we need to understand is, what cannabis is, how cannabis works, how does it help us, what are the economic ramifications, how does it affect medicine in terms of opioid addiction, and how do we embrace it in the medical society as a mainstream medication as opposed to, let's say, Percocet or Norco.
It's just about shifting perceptions and getting back to what's holistically acceptable.
Yes. Fortunately, now I think that we are on the horizon. So many states have adopted it. I think this is going to move much quicker. I mean, when you see a federal entity like the VA doing a research study with medicinal marijuana, you know that we're getting close.
Yeah, that's a good thing. If we could have dispensaries and clinics in our VA hospital settings for these men and women returning from battle.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you one last question. Who do you think is going to win when they legalize hemp? Well, when they re-legalize hemp as a crop, do you think Nebraska is going to win, or do you think Oklahoma is going to win by putting out more crops?
Well, that's a really good question. It all comes down to land mass and farmers, right?
Uh-huh.
There's already been some in Oklahoma City, some farmers that have been embraced by the local government to have hemp crops, right? And the idea is that with hemp crops, you're also creating jobs. And so, and then there's so many different uses for hemp. And so I'm hoping that they both win, so to speak, and then that grows. I just think that we need to embrace this so it's not a stigma and we utilize it as a benefit.
That's a very optimistic goal. I like the way you think.
I appreciate that.
Will you please come back and be my guest again, Dr. Blackmon?
Yes, I think we should do this again and really dig into some more topics regarding medicinal marijuana, but also other topics germane to medicine and things that are happening in our communities and societies. And sure, let's certainly do it again.
I would love that. Thank you so very much. And thanks for taking the time away from your very busy schedule to speak with my listeners and me.
Absolutely. Anytime. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blackmon. You're amazing. I'm looking forward to you coming back and speaking with us some more. Thanks, y'all, for listening. If you're in the Tulsa area, please do check out Greenwood Wellness. They have 2 locations. If you need a medical recommendation, you may even get to meet Dr. Blackmon in person. And please do join me, lisalandry.com. You can sign up for my YouTube channel. If you do that, you will know when each new podcast drops every Womanist Wednesday. Shout out, Ari. You should be here in Smokelahoma. It's really a special place.